In this podcast episode, Andrew Huberman and guest Scott Galloway, a male professor at NYU's Stern School of Business, engage in a multifaceted discussion surrounding masculinity, male roles, societal expectations, and pathways to a fulfilling life amid contemporary challenges. The conversation explores masculinity through the lenses of provider, protector, and procreator roles, analyzes the impact of big tech on social dynamics and mental health, examines sociopolitical implications for young men, and reviews substance use, mentorship, and systemic barriers affecting male well-being and societal progress. Galloway emphasizes the importance of having a personal code or framework for decision-making, especially for men who face numerous daily choices demanding integrity and resilience. This code, whether derived from family, religion, profession, or societal roles, guides men toward better decisions relative to their peer groups. He articulates masculinity not as a fixed trait tied strictly to birth sex, but as an aspirational set of positive attributes that young men can lean into to form identity and purpose. The three core masculine qualities he identifies are to be a provider, protector, and procreator. As a provider, a man should have an economic plan to contribute to and sustain his family, recognizing that economic viability sustains self-esteem and social standing. Protectorhood involves developing the strength and skills necessary to safeguard those one cares for, both physically and emotionally. Procreation, often misunderstood or demonized, is reframed positively as a motivating fire that, when channeled correctly, drives men to improve themselves across multiple dimensions. Galloway stresses that beyond these, optimizing for service rather than attention and generating surplus value in relationships and society are critical markers of mature masculinity. A significant part of the discussion touches on how young men should engage in social and romantic pursuits, expecting rejection as a necessary part of growth and success. Galloway advises young men to approach social interaction actively, understanding that getting no is part of the journey toward meaningful relationships and personal development. The decline of traditional social frameworks, coupled with the frictionless and curated nature of life promoted by algorithms, has reduced the opportunities for young men to build resilience through real-world interactions. The persistence to endure rejection and maintain agency in relationships is framed as crucial to becoming a fulfilled adult male. Big tech and social media's overwhelming impact on male identity, mental health, and social dynamics are highlighted as a modern antagonist. Galloway argues that these platforms addict youth with dopamine-driven compulsions akin to obsessive-compulsive disorder more than simple addiction models. They promote a frictionless life that discourages persistence, risk, and genuine social connection by offering constant, easy dopamine hits via entertainment, porn, and endless social feeds. This environment fosters anxiety, isolation, obesity, and reduced face-to-face interactions among young men, leaving them unprepared for adult responsibilities and relationships. Despite acknowledging that big tech companies and figures like Elon Musk have contributed great innovations and net positives in technology and economy, Galloway criticizes the lack of accountability around the social harms these platforms exacerbate. He advocates for common-sense regulation akin to environmental and food safety agencies, removal of protections shielding tech platforms from liability when algorithmically elevating harmful content, antitrust measures to revive competition, and age gating to protect minors from exposure to damaging content. The podcast explores the sobering realities confronting today's young men, particularly the erosion of traditional routes to economic and romantic success. Galloway points out that as women have ascended socioeconomically and educationally, men face increasing expectations to level up economically without equivalent structural support. Economic hypergamy remains a dominant factor in mating patterns, placing substantial pressure on men to provide financial stability, yet opportunities for prosperity and social mobility are seemingly less achievable for many youth compared to previous generations. This generational disparity is underscored by the disproportionate burden older generations place on younger ones through fiscal policies, including Social Security and tax frameworks that transfer wealth from working-age adults to seniors. Galloway critiques these policies as morally corrupt and self-serving, calling older generations the vampire generation for their reluctance to reinvest adequately in youth. This economic disadvantage contributes to elevated rates of male suicide, incarceration, addiction, and social disengagement. Alcohol is discussed from a social and pragmatic perspective. Galloway supports moderate, responsible drinking as a social lubricant that facilitates bonding, risk-taking, and valuable interpersonal connection, particularly among young adults. He contrasts this with trends of isolation and drug use that lean towards solitary or small group activities, warning against demonizing alcohol to the extent that youth lose opportunities for social engagement. However, both hosts agree on the importance of caution regarding alcohol abuse and professional consequences. The conversation also touches on cannabis use as a tool for some to aid sleep, anxiety, or pain, but notes potential risks, especially for predisposed young men, including negative impacts on motivation and mental health. The nuanced view respects individual variability and advocates for measured, informed use. Pornography, conversely, is identified as an under-researched and potentially highly damaging addiction, primarily affecting young men. Galloway warns that easy access to lifelike porn removes many young men's incentives to engage in the real-world social and romantic risk-taking essential for personal growth. He describes how porn acts as a high-efficiency, low-effort, sex expat substitute, undermining the development of communication, empathy, and resilience skills. This trend, exacerbated by big tech, threatens to erode traditional human mating and social structures. A strong theme throughout the episode is the critical need for male mentorship and service as pathways to healthy masculinity. Galloway highlights stark statistics showing the near absence of male role models in many young men's lives, often due to single-parent homes or abandonment. He calls on men of all ages to step up and provide fraternal and paternal love by mentoring boys and young men, helping them navigate basic life skills, emotional challenges, and decision-making. He advocates service to the community, not just self-improvement, but active engagement in helping others, as the ultimate expression of mature masculinity and surplus value. Service beyond one's immediate family instills purpose and allows men to participate in collective well-being, offsetting the isolation fostered by modern culture and technology. The dialogue extends into political territory, reflecting on how systemic issues intersect with masculinity. Galloway critiques both the far-right's conflation of masculinity with cruelty and the far-left's tendency to frame masculinity as inherently toxic. He calls for a balanced aspirational masculinity that embraces protective, provider, and procreator roles as positive forces, distinct from cruelty or coarseness. The discussion includes critical views of societal hypocrisy and failures at the policy level, focusing on inadequate support for young men, skewed political representation favoring older generations, and the erosion of opportunities for all but the wealthy or freakishly remarkable. Galloway urges reforms, including mandatory national service to help young people develop purpose, resilience, and social cohesion, sensible tax reform to address wealth transfer, increased support for public education and vocational training, and confronting the biases against boys in K-12 education. Interwoven with the broad societal discussion is insight into brain mechanisms underpinning male behavior. The conversation touches on the neuroscience, showing that anger and frustration are closely tied to dopamine circuits and can produce addictive arousal states. This biological inclination fuels social media outrage cycles and personal emotional struggles, including depression following anger episodes. Testosterone therapy is acknowledged as a legitimate tool for aging men to maintain vigor, strength, and well-being when conducted responsibly under medical guidance. The role of testosterone in motivating effort, risk-taking, and masculine behavior is emphasized, though with recognition of the need to balance it with empathy and to reject toxic extremes. The conversation points to a nuanced middle ground where masculinity expresses courage and valor rather than cruelty. In closing, Galloway applauds the promotion of intelligence, honesty, and scientific expertise as essential antidotes to the polarization and misinformation rampant in contemporary discourse. He affirms the value of measured, data-informed discussion over sensationalism or antagonism and stresses the need for leaders and public figures to model this approach. The podcast itself is framed as part of this effort to make science and knowledge accessible and cool, especially for younger generations navigating a complex social landscape. The episode debates the societal expectations placed on public figures and male role models, recognizing that leaders are imperfect human beings who endure disproportionate scrutiny, often amplified by social media algorithms incentivizing outrage. Galloway and Huberman agree that while figures like Elon Musk represent visionary and risk-taking aspects of masculinity, their personal conduct and online behaviors warrant critical appraisal, especially concerning punching down and failing protective responsibilities. They stress the importance of separating an individual's positive contributions from their flaws, acknowledging the complexity without idealizing or demonizing. They also explore contemporary challenges in social interactions and dating markets for men, including intensified fears related to social rejection, cancel culture, and scrutiny that inhibit young men from expressing romantic interest. Despite increased risks perceived in approaching women, fueled by digital footprints, public social feedback, and cancel culture, Galloway dispels myths that such respectful approaches jeopardize men's reputations or careers. The erosion of traditional social cues and dating scenarios has contributed to the sex recession, where fewer young men are in relationships compared to young women due to economic and social imbalances. The conversation touches on demographic and cultural dynamics affecting opportunity and societal progress. Galloway laments the top-heavy age structure politically and economically, where older generations control substantial resources and decision-making at the expense of youth, compromising intergenerational equity. He critiques elite higher education's tightening gates, favoring the extremely privileged or remarkable, sidelining the majority, and undercutting the American ideal of promoting the unremarkable. This stratification, coupled with insufficient public school funding and vocational education, limits social mobility and contributes to male disenfranchisement. Efforts such as mandatory retirement for senior academics, tax policy reforms, and expanding mentorship are proposed as ways to open pathways for younger generations to thrive and restore societal balance. Both guests advocate for the institution of mandatory national service, military or civilian, as a solution to many issues facing young people, particularly men. Drawing from models in Israel and Singapore, they highlight how universal service fosters purpose, discipline, camaraderie, cross-cultural understanding, and civic identity, reducing youth depression and social fragmentation. National service is portrayed as an opportunity to level social divides, instill communal values beyond ideology or identity politics, and prepare young men to become providers, protectors, and engaged citizens. Throughout the discussion, male vulnerabilities, such as higher suicide rates, addiction, incarceration, and educational disadvantages, are underscored, challenging the simplistic notions that men are either privileged or predatory. The dialogue calls for a compassionate understanding of male experiences without excusing harmful behavior, but recognizing the structural and cultural forces at play. The stigma around discussing male struggles and failures is identified as a barrier to healing and growth. A recurring theme is the call for men, especially those in midlife or older, to embrace service as the highest form of masculinity. Galloway urges men to mentor boys, become role models, and create surplus value societally rather than optimizing for personal attention or status alone. Service is framed as the key to actualizing masculine potentials and restoring societal function disrupted by technological, economic, and cultural shifts. Physical fitness is championed as foundational to male well-being and social functioning. Galloway advocates for men, particularly under 30, to prioritize strength, cardiovascular health, and outdoor activity, citing it as the best antidepressant and a marker of readiness to meet life's challenges. This physical agency supports the roles of protector and provider, builds self-esteem, and counteracts the sedentary impact of modern lifestyles dominated by technology use. Finally, the podcast explores how social media and online platforms have transformed political and social conversations, often promoting incivility, polarization, and economic incentives for antagonism. Galloway warns that these dynamics have fractured national unity, turning citizens against each other and distracting from common challenges. He expresses concern that hostile online environments and bot-driven misinformation campaigns deepen societal fractures, ultimately undermining democracy and communal well-being. This comprehensive conversation between Andrew Huberman and Scott Galloway traverses individual, social, and systemic dimensions of masculinity and male roles today, weaving neuroscience, sociology, economics, and personal experience to illuminate challenges and articulate pathways toward healthier, more purposeful masculine identities and societies.